took ordination together. So we're complete Dharma brothers, very close friends. And so I'm very happy that Kumotuku is here today. And he has a lot of insight. And we complement each other also a lot. The different perspectives and at the same time very similar. And so I just also, I wanted to introduce you, and maybe you should introduce yourself also.
Hello everyone. My name is, I go by the name of MOV00C. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Maybe a little background story of myself. I was born in Montreal, Canada. I like to talk about my birthday. I always find it pretty cool. I was born on August 8, 1988. I remember 8:40 a.m. I weighed 8 pounds. I was born at 8:40 a.m. and 8:80 a.m. So that's the one thing I like to brag about. And around the age of 3 or 4, I was recognized as the 23rd reincarnation of my grandfather, because the previous Gomotuku is the father of my mom. So and the relationship between Gomotuku and actually Lamoso, previous line of Lamaisha, it was sort of a teacher and disciple relationship for a while. The previous Gomotuku, I think, had the full Giluk lineage, one of the very few lamas that had the complete Giluk lineage. And I think for that reason, Lamayishi took some teachings. So that's basically the bond that we have, the connection from there. And so even though now supposedly with the reincarnation, now he's older than me. So I was sent to the monastery at the age of 7. Since then I've been in the monastery until I was like 20 years old. I graduated it's sort of an equivalent to bachelor's degree in the monastery. And in between those I've been to high school. I took a break from the monastery for a year. Did high school in the States. My mom lives in America, my dad still lives in Canada. And so I kind of have both sort of perspectives with the East and the West from that standpoint, I think. And I'm here. Happy to be here, and I'm sure we'll get a lot more to talk about ourselves. And so thank you very much.
So I was just curious, how many people that we have not met before? New people? No. Wow, many people. Many new people.
For me, pretty much all of you.
Yeah. So maybe I should do also an introduction of myself. I'll just make it short, not too long. Basically, so my parents were disciples of Lama Yeshe. And my mother, she has 9 children. So a big family. And so I was recognized when I was 18 months old. And since then I have been living in this type of life where everybody said I was a reincarnation of Lama Yeshe. And so I entered the monastery around when I was 6. And that's when I started the studies, Buddhist philosophy studies. And when I turned 18, I left. And I started doing Western studies. So I went to high school and college a little bit. So basically, I have been 12 years in the monastery, 12 years outside of the monastery. So now, it's been already 12 years. 2 cycles. So now I have a little bit of both integrated. But still learning, like everybody, we're always learning. Even the day we pass away, we're still learning the process of death. So it's a constant process, learning stage. Like what's his name, Plato, I think he used to say, one of the Greek philosophers, he says, the wisest man is a man who knows he knows nothing, right? So we're thinking, because I think it's interesting to know more about like your problems and your doubts, your questions. So I was thinking, instead of actually going to a topic and just talking about certain topics, I was thinking maybe it would be nicer, more dynamic, if maybe you could like give some input, like ask some questions or ask about some topic you want us to talk about, or even talk about your problems so that we can maybe help you a little bit from our perspective to how to counter them. So I think that could be more interesting than just us talking all the time. So please feel free to ask any questions. Please. Don't be shy.
Poche, can you enlighten us on the finer and deeper differences between bodhicitta and compassion?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think bodhicitta and compassion are very similar, and the basic is very similar. Bodhicitta is more unconditional, you could say. Like more like a mother with a child has no boundaries, no limits, no conditions.
Compassion.
Bodhicitta. Compassion is maybe, it's the same thing, but we use more the word compassion as like, when we see somebody suffering, then we have compassion. But if we don't see them, if we're not present, it doesn't really happen so much. We can imagine, right? We can imagine there's people suffering, but it's not the same feeling as when we actually see it in person. But basically, it's very similar.
I see the differences in that compassion has condition, whereas bodhicitta has no condition. It's more open. Good. Anybody, anywhere, as long as you see something you need to do, you do it for the benefit of somebody.
Exactly.
That's bodhicitta, no condition.
Yeah, it's constant.
Compassion, you may have condition. And if you compassion to this one, not so much to that one. Alright?
Yeah. So, for example, maybe there are many people suffering, many animals suffering, but we don't really think about it in our everyday life. We only, when we see maybe a car hit a dog, then we feel like emotion, compassion. When we see a video of maybe a butcher killing an animal, or somebody getting beaten, or somebody suffering in the hospital, that's where we get the compassion. But otherwise, we're not in contact, direct contact, and it's not so easy to feel that compassion because we are not aware. So bodhicitta is a more like universal compassion. It's what a bodhisattva would have constantly, at all times.
In other words, Rinpoche, if you don't mind, that means bodhicitta is more or less associated with equanimity in general. Am I right?
It's universal, constant. It's not something that is today yes, tomorrow no. It's not like that. It's like constant. That's why it's very important to meditate on bodhicitta. It's basically it's the same thing. It's just bodhicitta is more complete. It's more advanced, like a newer version. Compassion 9.2S.
Bring somebody across the suffering sea to the other shore. That's bodhicitta.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's very, very important to have compassion every day, and together with compassion to have humility and wisdom together. Then it becomes very powerful. Because if we just have compassion without wisdom, it's not complete. It's not enough. And to have compassion, you also have to have humility. Because without humility, you're only thinking about yourself. Just me, 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 me. So it's very important to be able to recognize this kind of mindset of self-cherishing stuff, being the center. And because with that type of mindset, then you're always going to end up with the same result, which is suffering. So as long as you think about yourself first, and even if you work really, really hard for yourself to be happy, you'll never be able to achieve it. Because that's the type of mindset that creates unhappiness, the type of mindset that creates unsatisfaction. So as long as you want to be happy, because it's mainly because you're not living the moment, you're not present enough. So then you're thinking about, oh, what happened yesterday? Oh, yesterday this happened, this person said this, or I didn't do this right. Or you're thinking about tomorrow, oh, this should happen, or I would like this to, be accomplished. So you're not really in the present state. So as long as you're not really living the moment and you're not present, then you're going to have that situation where you're unsatisfied. And through unsatisfaction and the self-cherishing, egoistical mindset, then we're always going to be suffering. So mainly the main purpose is to be able to recognize that so that we can help other people also to recognize that. And in that process, then we can really start to not be unhappy. At least that, I think, is the first step. Not to be unhappy. Would you like to also say something?
No, I think you pretty much gave the answer. I approve his message. No, but I agree with him. I think bodhicitta is the one that is more pretty universal. That is the complete one. And compassion is more of the unconditional love you have in general, but then you have the bodhicitta, which is the mind of a bodhisattva. That is the for all other sentient beings. So I think that's the big difference you have. So yeah, just, I think I don't want to revise too much because I think also already did that. So, but that's my perspective. Like you said before, bodhicitta is the one that is the one that brings the, what was that again? The one from the other shore, the sea to the, yeah. Okay, so yeah. And yeah, and I think the compassion is just in general you have the love, unconditional love for someone. But that doesn't mean it could be temporary, but it's not like bodhicitta, which is complete, constant. Whereas unconditional love, compassion can be, I have compassion for this, but you don't necessarily have to have compassion for the other thing, or for the other person. I guess that's the way I probably see it as. But it's still very similar. You can always play with it. We can debate. If you're in the monastery, you can debate, right? You can spend hours on this topic. But yeah, I think we'll probably be something like that level.
Are you suggesting, Moji, that compassion itself is associated with some degree of impermanence ultimately, whereas bodhicitta is not? Some
No.
level of possibility?
You mean if compassion is impermanent and bodhicitta is like impermanent? No, I don't think so. I think all that is impermanent. Yeah, impermanent. But that doesn't mean that once you have bodhicitta, you degrade from that feeling. It's just, it changes, it's a constant change. Maybe you have greater feelings, or love. So even that is impermanent. It changes, right? So, no, from that perspective, both is impermanent. Yeah. Hope that was okay.
So Geshe-la is asking a very interesting question. He's saying, he's asking, so what is our perspective on, for example, when we suffer a lot in everyday life, how can we solve that without the Buddhist perspective? Right?
Without relying on Dharma.
Yeah, without relying on Dharma. So this is a very interesting question. But I think, so from my point of view, I think Dharma is universal. So even, like you can use the name Dharma, but the technique is universal. Right? It's like a hug or a smile. Everybody can relate to that. From music, anywhere in the world, people can relate to the same thing. Wherever you go, someone who smiles, you can relate to that. Right? So it's just different names, maybe in different languages. A smile has a different name. Like for example, wherever you go, your mother is always the syllable ma, right? Anyway, in all the cultures, mother is M for some reason, I don't know. Interesting. Huh? Madre, yeah. And the father is like the P, Papa. Papa, Mama. So I think in that aspect, maybe like the way to kind of overcome the suffering, or at least to make it more easy, it's the same for everybody. And just sometimes we use the name or the label of Dharma or Buddha's teachings or Buddhism, but ultimately it's universal. It's the same. Because Dharma actually is more a lifestyle than anything. It's a philosophy, but it's a lifestyle. So it's not just something that you study today and tomorrow you forget. Or you just pick a Dharma book, or go to some teachings, do some meditation today and tomorrow, no more need meditation. No, it's not like that. To be a Buddhist is more of a lifestyle. It's a dedication, everyday dedication. It's not just like, okay, I'll be a Buddhist for 2 months, and then because I did these mantras and I went to these teachings, I'm a Buddhist for all my life. So basically, I think to answer the question, we have to analyze where does suffering come from? Why are we unhappy? That's the first step, to analyze, to observe our mind, to observe our emotions, because we have many positive emotions, but we also have many negative emotions. So where do the negative emotions come from? Do they come from an attitude? From a state of mind? Do they come from outside? Do they come from inside? All of these things are questions we have to ask ourselves every day. I think a very good way of, overcoming this is the first step would be when you wake up in the morning to be grateful. To be grateful is very important every day, because if we think about it, there's so many people and so many sentient beings suffering every day, that when we make ourselves big, when we think about, oh, me, like that, then our suffering becomes so big. We become the victim of our life. And then that way we just create this huge problem, this huge suffering. It's not real. It's not realistic. So it's important to compare also ourselves and say, okay, we have a roof on our head, we have family, we have company, warmth, we have food, we have shelter, all of these things that are basic for at least the temporary happiness. And also to be aware that when we suffer, it's temporary suffering. It's changing. So we can't say, oh, I'm unhappy today, so I'm going to be unhappy all my life. It doesn't make sense. So when you recognize that suffering is temporary, then also it's more easy to, relax,
Let go.
to let go, yeah. Not to keep. Normally, like, the negative things you should never keep. You should not overvalue negativity, because that's something the society and the system tends to do a lot. They overvalue negativity a lot. Like if a mother, for example, she raises many children by herself, gets them to college, everything, and that doesn't really come out in the newspaper. Right? She worked for 20 years to get them to college, working super hard. But if a mother kills her son, then it makes headlines. Why is that? Why is it that in the news people tend to want to see negative things more than positive things? Why is it more interesting? So that's a mindset we have. In a way, we have almost been educated that way to give more importance to the bad things. Like maybe our mother can say, oh, I love you, take care of you, give you food every day, work so hard for you. Maybe one day she slaps you, and you always remember that day. Right? Oh, after 20 years, I can still remember when you slapped me. But you don't remember everything, all the good things that she did for you every day of those 20 years. Why is that? You should ask questions like that. Why do we give so much importance to these things that are actually insignificant? If we make the negative parts, we make it small, we make the positive things much bigger, we overvalue positiveness, then it's going to make our heart much lighter. Right? So that's, I think, a very important factor also to not keep the negative things, especially if it's, like other people's issues or other people's frustrations or problems or conflicts. Many times we tend to take it personally. And so I think that's very important not to take it personally. Just let go. And the good things you keep. Positive things, beautiful things. That you keep. So that will help you to prolong your life. And if you keep the negative things and you let it push you down, it's like carrying a bag, heavy weight. And this will shorten your life, will make you, get more sick, and sad. You get up in the morning, you're like, I have another day to go, oh my God. So it's important to really have positive attitude in life, every day. And to be able to relate to other people that are suffering a lot also. Because if we compare that, our suffering is nothing. Like how many people are like, let's say, in prison for life? Or being tortured, or have no food, or have no family, or like they're refugees. I mean, there's so many situations every day that we can relate to, and by thinking about that, we can actually feel so lucky. So I think that's a good technique to be able to, forget about suffering. Of course, we are in samsara, so it's inevitable to suffer. And the fact is that if there were no suffering, there would be no Buddhas. Right? So nobody would think about being liberated from samsara. Is that correct? If there's no suffering, there would be no Buddhas. Nobody would say, okay, I want to become enlightened, I want to work hard, So it's, in a way, it's like a balance, the equation balances out. But the thing is not to let the balance, the scale change too hard. Because then you get overcome by this negative feeling, by this victimized, feeling sorry for yourself. Maybe you should give someone, otherwise I'm going to start talking.
Question. I think it's the way the Dharma is basically trying to understand the source as well. I think pretty much also he gave a broad explanation. He included most of my answers in there already. But I think it's to understand where the suffering comes from. A lot of times we tend to focus on the impact, the result. Right? And it's good to kind of sit back and try to think of where does that emotion come from, and to kind of analyze and go back without having to rely on mantras. Because that was the question, right? Without relying on Dharma or having taken refuge. So, I mean, without that, I think one way would be be trying to really analyze where the suffering comes from, whatever suffering you may be facing, and really understand that it's like he said, it's temporary. It's temporary. There's a good example, a psychologist, I can't remember her name, but something like he said, like the bag is like water. Like if you had, she was like, guess how much it weighs this glass filled with water. And people would be saying like maybe 8 ounces, 12 ounces. And she's like, fine, but that's not the issue. The issue is how longer you hold that, the more you will stress your arm. So if you just hold it for like a minute, it's bearable. 15 minutes, it start hurting. Half an hour, it'll really hurt your arm. So even though it's really light, the longer you keep it, the longer you hold, it becomes more stressful, it becomes more painful. So that's when you need to know when to let go. So you have that. So I think it's very similar to what he said. You have to be able to let go, use, and be calm. And just, yeah, so you're going to say
Yeah. Suffering comes from false thinking.
false thinking, yeah.
Yeah?
And also a lot of times the problems that we have is a lot of them are mainly projections
Yeah.
that we have, our projection. So they're not exactly what it is. It's mainly your interpretation of whatever you kind of, the negative thoughts you've been accumulating.
Before Buddha himself said to Ananda, dwell in the station of body. Body is impure. Body is not pure. Okay? Thoughts are suffering. Feelings are suffering. Thought is impermanent. So we must not think of some thoughts that will mean suffering. Because start thinking of this and that, you get feeling. Feeling becomes suffering.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of times suffering also comes from attachment.
Yeah.
You're too attached to a certain kind of feeling or whatever idea you may have. Don't be too attached to it. Remember impermanence. Be open to change. Be flexible, adapting. I think those are one of the ways that you can really solve issues, but not being too attached to that idea that you have a certain thing. And be open to different interpretations, be open to change. Those are the ways to.
There are many perspectives about any situation. You have like so many different angles and perspectives. So like fixed ideas, agitated mind. You understand that? Like fixed ideas, agitated mind. If you just stay fixed on something and you obsess on that, that's going to agitate you. So you really have to be detached and try to keep calm at all times. Try to keep your center. So that helps a lot. And I think happiness, as a state of mind, is very difficult to achieve. So the best way is to try to focus more on non-unhappiness. Try not to be unhappy. And that way you create the cause for the different aspects of happiness to come into your life. And the main purpose, of course, is to be able to help other people not to be unhappy, to help other people to be able to be more aware of their emotions and their mind. And just like Omar just said, we believe our mind in most cases. We believe what we see, what we hear. But if you think about it, there's just a small percentage of what we understand. It's just a small percentage of the reality. And it's like somebody who writes a book. They try to explain something to the reader, but the person who writes a book is never going to fully understand what the reader is going to understand. And the same way around. The reader will never understand completely what the writer wanted to say. So there's always let's say like a big percentage of that's open to misinterpretation, and or that you can never know. So we have this idea that we think we know everything, like, oh, or you see the cup and you think you understand, you see the cup as it is. But what we are saying is not really the cup. It's an interpretation of what we think the cup is. So there's so many different conditionings around that aspect, or that reality that we are seeing. So the same thing happens like in any situation in life, where maybe people are telling us something, or people are criticizing us, or any type of situation. We have to be able to be dynamic and to be able to see it from different perspectives, so that we don't focus just on one and become like frustrated or stressed because of that fixed idea. So I think if we're able to pursue that type of mentality, then we can actually start to be more happy and suffer less. To be able to adapt. Because basically that's the main teaching of Buddhism, is how to be able to adapt in a positive way in any situation. That's, I think, the main teaching of Buddhism is that one. And to be able to help other people to do that too, by understanding our true nature.
That was a long answer. Yeah, I mean, just to have gratitude, and I think you did say that before. I mean, comparing situations may not always be the wisest thing to do, but in certain cases it helps, especially if you know how to use the Dharma phrase. Yeah, like to like he said, having a roof, to have a roof on top of your head, food, and to compare yourself to those who have less than you. I think that's also another good way to kind of see yourself, how fortunate you are, and not complain about things that you don't have, because you always compare yourself to those who have more than you.
Yeah.
I think that's another one thing that you should try to avoid as much as you can. Maybe if it's something positive, you know, like, I don't know, in your work, as long as it's nothing like, if it's helping you to elevate your sort of position, then maybe okay. Like, I want to be like my boss, I want to, you know, have the same kind of, I want to achieve that kind of level of success, it may be fine. But when it comes to other details, right, when you're not happy about certain things because you don't have a certain product or whatever it may be, that's just an example, right? Just compare yourself to those who have less. I think that's another good way to feel like fortunate to be that what you have.
In the practice of Tantra, it said that enjoyment is not the problem. The problem is attachment to the enjoyment. Like when we do eating or any enjoyment, we supposedly offer it to self-generated deity.
Yes.
So how do I know if I'm not deceiving myself?
When you break your iPhone, how you feel? That's when you know. Then you're good.
When your girlfriend leaves you, is it okay?
I think that's a test, right?
Yeah.
Tantra is a process. It would be nice to be like Miller Rapper in one lifetime, you know, but I don't think that's possible. I mean, it could be very difficult. But I think that practice in itself is very important to understand the concept, is to be able to enjoy it, to be able to enjoy all the worldly things that we have, but not to be attached to those things, meaning that don't suffer from it as less as you can. I mean, we're doomed to suffer. Don't think you can find a way not to suffer. That's one I don't know what's Cinderella, I don't know what that is. That's never going to happen until you become Buddha.
Don't get others to become disadvantageous.
Be open to suffering, right? And don't feel it's the end of the world. Because just remember, you're in samsara. Right? And so, yeah, just, yeah,
Yeah, I think there's different levels of suffering, of course. Like Bob Marley says, there's one song of Bob Marley says, you think you're happy, but you're living in hell. No, you think you're in heaven, but you're living in hell. And that's a good example, you know, like, Buddhism does talk about it, that even when we're happy, we're still suffering. So there's different levels of suffering. And when we get attached to something too much, then we always tend to suffer. So that's why moderation is very good. You And that's what the Lamric talks about also, is the middle way, middle path. So not to go to extremes, try to keep the middle way.
Sangika Madhyamaka.
You should be here, man. You should be
Yeah.
Switch.